Welcome, dear subscribers and curious listeners of my channel. Today we take a closer look at a group of wizards who don't seek fame, but fight the darkness every single day. To the Aurors. The films only gave them fleeting attention. We briefly saw Mad-Eye Moody, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and heard mentions of others, but the real depth of their story and mission unfolds in the books. Especially important is the journey Harry took to one day stand among them. I want to tell you what the movies didn't show, how Aurors are made, who they once were, what they've sacrificed, and how the Ministry of Magic shaped this elite force. Enjoy watching. Number 1. The requirements. In his 5th year at Hogwarts, Harry had to seriously think about his future. The idea of becoming an Auror didn't just inspire him, it became a goal. But Professor McGonagall warned him right away the road would be long and difficult. To pass the first selection stage, a student must score exceeds expectations or higher in potions, defense against the dark arts, transfiguration, herbology, and charms. It's not just about casting spells, it's about knowledge, discipline, and emotional resilience. Number 2. Training takes 3 years. Even with the required grades, candidates undergo a full background check. Only then do they face 3 years of intense training, magical dueling, high-pressure scenarios, investigative work, Patronus summoning, even Animagus transformation, all part of the journey. Aurors aren't just fighters, they're investigators, field agents, and the shield between the wizarding world and the darkness. Number 3. The origins. The Auror office was founded back in the 17th century in Britain. Over time, its influence expanded to other countries. During international magical conflicts, British Aurors were sometimes dispatched abroad. One of the most famous among them was Theseus Scamander, Newt's older brother, who eventually became head Auror. From such missions, the global reach of magical law enforcement began. Number 4. MACUSA, the American Aurors. America has its own Aurors too. After the Salem witch trials peaked in 1693, the Magical Congress of the United States of America, MACUSA, was founded. Among its agents was Tina Goldstein, a familiar face to fans of fantastic beasts. American Aurors operate under their own laws, but their mission is the same, protecting the magical community. Number 5. Frank and Alice Longbottom. Neville's parents were among the best. Members of the original Order of the Phoenix and experienced Aurors, they paid a terrible price for their loyalty. After being tortured by Bellatrix Lestrange, they lost their minds. Since then, they've lived at St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies. Neville visited them often, and after Voldemort's defeat, he followed in their footsteps, becoming an Auror himself, and later, the herbology professor at Hogwarts. Number 6. Umbridge tried to block Harry. In 5th year, when students choose their future careers, Harry said he wanted to become an Auror. Present at his meeting with Professor McGonagall was also Dolores Umbridge. She sneered and asked, "Is Potter emotionally stable enough for such a profession?" What followed was a verbal duel. McGonagall famously retorted, "I will do everything in my power to make sure he becomes an Auror." Number 7. Barty Crouch and his ruthless methods. In the 1970s, the Auror department was overseen by Barty Crouch Sr. Under his leadership, many Death Eaters were captured. But there was a cost. Crouch granted Aurors permission to use unforgivable curses. His policies were highly controversial as the line between justice and tyranny blurred. Still, his methods worked. The threat was neutralized, albeit at the expense of moral compromise. Number 8. Alastor Moody, the greatest Auror of all time. Alastor Moody didn't chase Death Eaters, he hunted them. During the First Wizarding War, he brought in more than half the names on the Ministry's most wanted list. He once stunned 4 dark wizards in a single duel, one of them mid-disapparition. His magical eye could see through walls, invisibility cloaks, even lies. Constant vigilance, he barked at every trainee, and he lived by it. Entire villages whispered his name when the air grew cold. Most dark wizards ran. The brave ones regretted staying. But paranoia took its toll. Moody set traps in his own house, slept with a wand under his pillow. Some Aurors laughed behind his back, calling him mad. Then came the Triwizard Tournament. Bartemius Crouch Jr. chose to impersonate Moody for a reason. Because no one would question his authority, because even Voldemort respected the legend. When the real Moody was found locked in a trunk, battered and pale, no one laughed again. He died later, fighting in the Battle of the Seven Potters. Wand raised, back turned to no one. A true aura to the end. Number 9. Auras and the use of unforgivable curses. During the First Wizarding War, Barty Crouch Sr. stood before the Wizengamot and declared, "We will fight fire with fire." That sentence changed everything. Auras were granted the legal right to use unforgivable curses, on one condition, only against Death Eaters. It was a desperate law for a desperate time. And it blurred the line between justice and vengeance. Some celebrated it, others whispered that the Ministry had become what it feared. Alastor Moody never denied using the Cruciatus curse. "I did what I had to do," he once growled. "They didn't come quietly." He was famous for dragging in Death Eaters with broken bones and scorched robes. He claimed it was self-defense. No one challenged him. He was too respected, or too feared. But not all Auras used that power with such control. Rumors spread of young recruits testing the Imperius on suspects. Some even vanished from the force after quiet investigations, but no charges were ever made, no trials, just silence. After the Second War, the policy was revoked. Kingsley Shacklebolt called it a necessary sin that must never become a habit. The Aura Office rewrote its protocols. Unforgivable curses returned to their original status, illegal under all circumstances. But the damage lingered. Older Auras spoke of the days when a flick of the wand could decide guilt. Some said it saved lives, others said it shattered souls. The truth, as always, lived in the shadows. Number 10. Special skills and training. Auras don't just cast spells, they read faces, listen to silence, detect lies without veritaserum. Every recruit is trained to move unnoticed, question without raising a wand, and catch deception in a glance. In their final year, trainees face a simulation called the Room of Echoes, where no spell works the same way twice. You survive not by force, but by focus. "We teach them to think like their enemy," said Robards, "and teach them how to stop thinking like one." Kingsley Shacklebolt mastered that balance. Calm under pressure, he once negotiated the release of 6 hostages in a Diagon Alley apothecary without casting a single spell. His voice did the work. That control, that grace under fire, it came from training, not talent. After the war, when the wizarding world needed healing more than hexes, Kingsley took the post of minister. No one else was even considered. "Leadership," McGonagall once said of him, "isn't shouting orders, it's knowing when not to." Some Auras train for months in specialized fields: counter-curse analysis, magical forensics, wandless defense. Hermione Granger, though not an Aura, helped design a course on magical ethics in conflict, because power is easy to teach, judgment is not. Those who pass become more than enforcers. They become shields. Not because they fight well, but because they know when to stop fighting. Number 11. Emergency powers. During the war. During the Second Wizarding War, fear gave Auras a new kind of weapon, authority without limits. The Ministry passed Emergency Statute 28B, allowing arrests without warrants and searches without oversight. Officially, it was to fight Voldemort. Unofficially, it blurred the line between justice and control. Even senior Auras like Kingsley Shacklebolt admitted, "We were told to trust no one. Sometimes that meant trusting the wrong people." After Bill and Fleur's wedding, the law turned on its own. Harry, Ron, and Hermione were hunted not just by Death Eaters, but by Ministry patrols. "They think we're undesirables," Hermione whispered in Deathly Hallows. The trio couldn't apparate safely, couldn't send owls, couldn't even say Voldemort's name. Doing so triggered the trace. Muggleborns were dragged from their homes, wands were snapped in ministry courtrooms, all under the name of law. Not every Auror followed orders blindly. Some vanished from their posts, others leaked warnings to families in danger. It's said that one unnamed Auror sabotaged a ministry raid by leaving the Floo network open just long enough for a group of Muggle-born children to escape. Their name was never revealed. If caught, they'd have been tried for treason, but that's the quiet kind of heroism Aurors rarely get medals for. After the war, when Kingsley became minister, he ordered a full audit of wartime powers. "We cannot fight darkness by becoming it," he wrote in the new Auror Code. The rules changed, but the memory didn't. For many Aurors, those years left a scar not on their bodies, but on their conscience. Number 12, Order of Merlin, the highest honor. The Order of Merlin is not just a medal, it's a statement. It tells the wizarding world. This person stood when others fell. It was created centuries ago to honor those who served magic with bravery, wisdom, or innovation. But for Aurors, only one thing earns it: sacrifice. Frank and Alice Longbottom both received the Order of Merlin First Class for their actions during the First Wizarding War. They faced the Lestranges without flinching, fought even as they were tortured into silence. Their award was given in a quiet ceremony. They were already in St. Mungo's by then. Gawain Robards, who later became head of the Auror office, once said, "Most of the time an Auror's reward is a scar and a night without nightmares." But there are exceptions. Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Ron Weasley received the Order of Merlin First Class after the Battle of Hogwarts. Not for surviving, for choosing to fight when every path led to death. "It's not about glory," Hermione told the press. "It's about doing the right thing, even when it costs everything." Only a handful of living Aurors hold the first-class order. One of them is Kingsley Shacklebolt. Before becoming minister, he led secret missions that crippled Voldemort's inner circle. He once protected the Muggle Prime Minister under a false identity for months. When he was offered the award, he nearly declined. "Give it to those who didn't make it home," he said. They gave it to him anyway. His name now hangs in the Auror office beside a list of the fallen. The ceremony is brief, a gold circle, embossed with Merlin's crest, pinned over the heart. No speeches, no parade, just a moment of silence and the weight of memory. For Aurors, the order is not about pride, it's a reminder that magic is not always safe, that courage means walking into the dark alone, and that sometimes the highest honor is simply surviving long enough to accept it. Number 13, secret connection with the Department of Mysteries. Deep beneath the Ministry of Magic, behind a spinning circular hallway and black doors that open without handles, lies the Department of Mysteries. Most witches and wizards know little about it. Even fewer understand how often Aurors are called to work alongside the unspeakables who dwell there. These secret alliances are forged in silence, with no records and no glory, but they exist, and sometimes only through that strange cooperation is justice served. In 1987, a case known only as the Opal Charm murders brought Auror Dawlish to the edge of madness. Victims had no wounds, only frozen expressions of awe. Dawlish had exhausted every lead until he was sent, uninvited, to the Department of Mysteries. There, an unspeakable named Corwin handed him a single artifact, a twisted silver dial that glowed faintly when near cursed memory. Using it, Dawlish found the last scene each victim had witnessed, a shimmering, disembodied charm cast by a dark wizard who had found a way to weaponize the Hall of Prophecy. The killer was caught within days. The artifact was returned. No one ever spoke of it again. Aurors aren't permitted to ask questions inside that department. You'll be told what you need one unspeakable, reportedly said to Tonks when she questioned an order. Nothing more. She never talked about it after. Even Kingsley Shacklebolt, after becoming minister, avoided speaking about his time collaborating with them. "There are places in the ministry," he said once in passing, "where silence protects lives better than shields." Some believe this connection is dangerous. Others say it's the only way to fight what's truly hidden. But one thing is certain. When a case seems unsolvable, when the dark magic is beyond textbooks and training, auras are not left alone. A door opens in the lowest level of the ministry. No questions asked. And behind it, a voice simply says, "Follow me." Number 14, Women Auras, Underrated Heroines. Few remember the name of Mary Cartwright, an aura who brought down the Blackwood Coven alone in 1962. It happened deep in Yorkshire, where 4 dark witches had hidden for years. The official report claims she walked into the den under Polyjuice, pretended to be one of them, and cast a simultaneous full-body bind curse on all 4. When reinforcements arrived, the fight was already over. Yet Mary's name is barely mentioned outside oral files. Like many women in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, her work went uncelebrated. Tina Goldstein, on the other hand, left a more visible mark, though not in Britain. As a top aura for MACUSA, she investigated Grindelwald's growing influence across New York. It was Tina who first arrested him in 1926, disguised as Percival Graves. She stood her ground, wand raised, while others hesitated. Queenie once said of her sister, "Tina has a heart like iron and nerves like steel." Still, most fans of the wizarding world forget her name, remembering instead the men who stood behind her. Dolores Umbridge, ironically, is often assumed to have been an aura. She was not. Despite her high position in the ministry and her obsession with order, she never served in the field. She worked in the improper use of magic office and later in the Muggle-born Registration Commission, both feared but neither requiring her to face actual danger. Her power came from politics, not courage. When she tried to question Harry's dreams of becoming an aura, McGonagall snapped, "Potter has every right to train for the ministry, and I will personally make sure he does." The real female auras risked their lives in silence. Some died in battle, others disappeared during missions no one speaks of now. Their stories, scattered across faded reports and unsent letters, rarely made it into books or films. But the dark wizards they captured, the curses they absorbed, the fear they walked into daily, all prove their worth. If history forgot their names, perhaps it's time we remember them now. Number 15, Why Auras Rarely Marry. Few wizards ever dream of becoming auras. Even fewer survive the training. But those who do rarely speak of the toll it takes, not just on their bodies, but on their hearts. In the shadows of glory, away from headlines and honor rolls, lies a quiet truth that few want to face. Auras, the elite dark wizard catchers of the magical world, often lead lives of solitude. Marriage is a rarity, and love is a luxury few can afford. Despite their importance to the safety of the wizarding world, their personal lives are usually marked by long stretches of loneliness, postponed dreams, and ghosts from cases past. According to the confidential files of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, less than 40% of all auras ever enter long-term romantic relationships, and those who do often leave the service to preserve what remains of normalcy. The data itself is grim. A profession filled with violence, long absences and psychological scars is not exactly fertile ground for romance. Even among Hogwarts alumni, the trend is visible. Nymphadora Tonks was one of the few exceptions, but her love story with Remus Lupin ended in heartbreak on the battlefield of the Second Wizarding War. Most auras, like Mad-Eye Moody, never even come close to such vulnerability. Alastor Moody was the ministry's most famous aura, feared and respected in equal measure. A man who captured countless Death Eaters and lived with more injuries than most could imagine. Yet for all his victories, Moody never settled down. He chose his wand over companionship, his mission over intimacy. He was always the first to arrive at a crime scene and the last to leave an interrogation. Constant vigilance, he used to say, a motto that became his lifestyle. In truth, vigilance leaves no room for candle-lit dinners, soft words, or shared dreams. He lived alone, died alone, and was mourned as a hero, but never as a husband or father. The paradox is haunting. Those who protect society are often the ones robbed of its warmth. The very nature of Auror work, stealth, secrecy, and sudden departures, makes it nearly impossible to build a steady life. The work consumes them, demands that they always be ready, always be alert. The unpredictability of danger does not care for anniversaries, birthdays, or quiet mornings. One moment, an Auror may be sitting across from their partner, and the next, chasing an illegal portkey to Albania. Who would willingly build a life with someone who may disappear forever at the sound of a howler? Neville Longbottom, the unlikely hero of the Battle of Hogwarts, once joined the Auror office in the post-war years. For a brief time it seemed like a generation of new, optimistic Aurors might rebuild the department, but even Neville, with his quiet strength and love for herbology, found the life unsustainable. Eventually he left and became a professor at Hogwarts, where he later married Hannah Abbott. It's not a coincidence that the marriage came only after he walked away from the dangers of his former job. Stability, it seemed, was only possible outside the ministry's most dangerous department. The Auror lifestyle leaves more than just physical scars. Memories of dead colleagues, unsolved cases, and close brushes with death weigh heavily on the mind. Many suffer from sleepless nights, frequent nightmares, and a chronic inability to trust. Love demands vulnerability, but the Auror life encourages the opposite: emotional armor, detachment, and a hardened exterior. "You can't hesitate," Kingsley Shacklebolt once said during training, "and you can't break. If you do either, you're dead." In such a world, softness is not a virtue, it's a risk. Relationships require time, and time is the one thing Aurors never have. Missions often stretch into weeks or months, letters go unanswered, visits are missed, and excuses pile up. It's no wonder many partners leave, unable to accept being second to a career that promises nothing but danger in return. Some Aurors try to make it work, attempting to balance duty and love, but more often than not, one of the two must be sacrificed, and in most cases the badge wins over the bouquet. Hey. There's also the danger that comes from simply being connected to an Auror. When a dark wizard knows your name, your family becomes a target. Enemies don't just attack directly, they strike where it hurts most. It's an unspoken rule in the darker corners of the magical world. To make an Auror suffer, you don't aim for them. You go after their heart. Some Aurors, knowing this, choose isolation as a shield. They love from a distance or not at all. They don't marry, not because they don't wish to, but because they don't dare. The toll on mental health is significant. St. Mungo's psychiatric ward has quietly admitted more Aurors over the last 3 decades than any other division of the ministry. Most are diagnosed with forms of magical PTSD. It's hard to sustain a relationship when you're haunted by visions of the dead, hexed by past enemies, or wake up screaming from the echo of a Cruciatus curse. These traumas don't just affect the aura, they ripple out, consuming any emotional ties they might have tried to build. Love does not grow well in scorched soil. There's a cruel irony in how society praises Aurors, but does not understand them. They are celebrated in newspapers, awarded medals and quoted in textbooks, but they are also often alone at the back of the room during such ceremonies, with no spouse to share the applause. The community hails them as protectors, but forgets to protect them in return. The ministry covers physical injuries with the best spellwork gold can buy, but who heals the emotional wounds? Who comforts the ones who hold the line between order and chaos? Number 16. Secret weapons, Auror artifacts. In the shadowy corridors of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, buried beneath the bustling chaos of the Ministry of Magic, there lies a section known only to a few, the artifact vault of the Auror office. While the wider wizarding world imagines auras as powerful duelists relying solely on their wands and quick reflexes, those who have walked the halls of this hidden armory know otherwise. Here, nestled in protective enchantments and ancient glass cases, rest some of the most unusual and potent magical tools in existence, items that many believe are myths but which have saved lives in silence. These are the secret weapons of the Aurors, and their stories are far stranger than fiction. Alastor Moody was perhaps the most iconic Auror of the 20th century, known as much for his eccentricities as for his success in capturing dark wizards. Yet few realize that his greatest advantage in battle was not his wand, but his eye. Implanted magically into the socket he had lost during a duel, this vivid electric blue orb could rotate 360 degrees, see through solid objects, and even penetrate invisibility cloaks. His magical eye spun around to check the rear, rolling rights in Goblet of Fire, revealing how Moody never had to rely on guesswork or hope in a fight. It wasn't just surveillance, it was survival. And the enchantments behind the eye, rumoured to have come from a lost department in magical prosthetics, remain closely guarded by the Ministry to this day. The magical eye wasn't alone. Moody carried dozens of other protective items in his coat: sneakoscopes, dark detectors, secrecy sensors. But beyond these commercially available tools were artifacts created by the Department of Mysteries or passed down through ancient Auror lines. The Mirror of Pursuit, a charmed hand mirror smaller than a coin, could show the reflection of anyone following its owner, even through solid walls. Moody is believed to have used one during the Great Purge of 1981, when rogue Death Eaters attempted to ambush Aurors outside Ottery St. Catchpole. Their attack failed not because of a protective spell, but because Moody saw them coming. There's another relic whispered about among trainees: the pendant of Blacksteel. Locked in a steel box in the Auror vault, this ancient amulet is said to tremble when within 10 miles of a Horcrux or any concentrated source of dark magic. Unlike a dark detector which simply glows or whines, the pendant affects the magical aura of the person wearing it, forcing them into a mild state of hyper-awareness, an adrenaline surge triggered by evil itself. This tool was almost certainly used by Auror Tiberius McLagan in 1997 when tracking down renegade snatchers in the north. It's mentioned only in passing in Ministry transcripts, but one line stands out. Agent McLagan reported a pulling sensation in his chest just prior to engagement. No injuries sustained. A curious note, unless one knows the legend of Blacksteel. Among the most mysterious tools are the inscriptor cards, folding pieces of dragonhide enchanted to store real-time information. These are the predecessors to modern magical communication devices and can be activated by a simple tap and thought. They show the last known magical trace of a fugitive, the movement of unregistered wands, and occasionally cryptic warnings from the unspeakables. Senior Auror Bethany Proudfoot was said to carry 3 at all times, each connected to a specific sector of Diagon Alley. During the 1993 Banshee crisis, she used one to predict the creature's escape route, blocking its flight through magical alleyways and capturing it before a single civilian was harmed. And then there are the cloaks. Not the legendary invisibility cloak owned by Harry Potter, though it became famous for a reason, but a more practical cousin, the Shadow Weave cloak. Stitched with threads of demiguise fur and imbued with temporal displacement charms, these cloaks allow the user to blend into dim light almost entirely. They don't grant full invisibility, but their magic disrupts a person's silhouette, making them appear as a shimmer in the air. Aurors on reconnaissance missions, particularly in Nocturne Alley, often wore these cloaks during covert operations. Auror Nari Singh wore one during the 1984 raid on the wand smuggling syndicate in Wales, emerging from the shadows like smoke to apprehend a criminal mid-spell. One of the oldest known Auror artifacts is the Compass of Reverence, a golden disc no larger than a snitch, covered in runes, which always points to the nearest wand that has recently cast an unforgivable curse. The compass was thought lost during the First Wizarding War, but rumors suggest it was rediscovered in the ruins of the Gaunt Shack. Whether true or not, the compass was used in a 1980 operation called Black Veil, where it allegedly led an Auror team through a forest right to a hidden Death Eater camp disguised by layers of illusion. The Auror who carried it, Irene Wagtail, filed no public report, but she later received the Order of Merlin Second Class, and her silence is often taken as confirmation. In the far corner of the artifact vault lies an object so unusual it defies description, the Singing Lens. This is a polished crystal orb that hums when exposed to certain magical frequencies. Used primarily in interrogation, the lens can identify lies by the pitch of its hum, though only a skilled legilimens can interpret the sound. It was created during the height of the Goblin Rebellions and adapted by Aurors in the 1960s to interrogate suspects without using Veritaserum. Few know how to activate it, and even fewer know how to understand it. But in the words of former head Auror, Gawain Robards, the lens never lies, it just sings in riddles. Number 17, Psychological Conditioning, How Not to Lose Your Mind. In the dimly lit halls of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, far beyond the bustling atrium of the Ministry of Magic, lies a corridor that very few ever notice. Behind an unremarkable wooden door with no nameplate and no spell of glamour to call attention to it, exists one of the most vital institutions for the survival of the Auror Office. This room, designated only as Room 319 in Ministry records, serves as the headquarters for a unique form of magical support, psychological rehabilitation for those tasked with hunting the darkest wizards the magical world has ever known. For Aurors, or as many still call them dark wizard catchers, the mental toll of their job is not only real, it is life-threatening. Few outsiders know that a part of the Auror training includes extensive psychological conditioning designed to keep their minds intact in the face of horror. Throughout history, the wizarding world has celebrated the courage and strength of Aurors. Names like Alastor Moody are held in reverence, synonymous with bravery. But what even seasoned witches and wizards fail to realize is that for every success story, there are countless others who succumb to the darkness, not in battle, but in mind. The price of constant exposure to dark magic is not always physical. The mind, just as susceptible to spells as the body, is often a more fragile vessel. It can fracture under the pressure of curses, illusions, and horrors that defy the laws of reality. For this reason, the Ministry began the Psychological Stabilization Protocol in 1982, an initiative spearheaded by healer Aneth Bletchley, an expert in post-traumatic enchantment disorders. Aneth, a quiet woman with a long history working at St. Mungo's spell damage ward, had seen too many Aurors admitted with symptoms no one could explain. Nightmares that couldn't be dispelled, hallucinations not caused by any known curse, and a debilitating condition known as magical dissonance, in which a wizard becomes unable to cast spells without triggering emotional trauma. The mind remembers spells, she once told the Daily Prophet, and sometimes it stores them in places where healing charms cannot reach. It was Bletchley who developed the Auror-specific therapy regimen still used today, blending Muggle psychological techniques with magical tools such as calming drafts, pensive reprocessing, and spell-induced cognitive restructuring. The dangers that Aurors face are not limited to the battlefield. The real war takes place in the quiet hours after the case is closed, when memories return uninvited. An example often referenced in internal training manuals is the case of Ewan Travers, a promising recruit from the class of 1985. Assigned to track down a rogue group of dark spell traffickers in Nocturne Alley, Ewan witnessed a victim trapped in a Cruciatus loop, an enchantment that replays the torture curse continuously in a suspended state. Though he succeeded in freeing the man and capturing the culprits, Ewan found himself unable to sleep afterward. The sound of screams, even in silence, became a constant companion. By the end of that year, he had voluntarily checked into Room 319. Inside Room 319, Aurors like Ewan are treated using an evolving set of techniques. The first stage is known as spell unpacking, in which a pensieve is used not merely to view memories, but to isolate magical contamination in thought patterns. The presence of dark residue, fragments of malevolent spells left behind in the mind, is identified and neutralized. This is followed by sessions with specialized calming drafts that are brewed with silverleaf, saprophoros root, and a rare variant of asphodel known to suppress intrusive magical echoes. The brews are tailored to each aura's emotional profile as determined by enchanted personality parchments written by the Office of Mental Monitoring. But the psychological conditioning begins long before such trauma ever occurs. From the first month of Auror training, recruits attend weekly sessions led by a rotating team of mind healers and potion specialists. They are taught to recognize the early symptoms of magical paranoia, a state where enchantments manipulate perception. They learn to defend against emoticurses, a class of dark magic that implants artificial emotions, leading to uncontrolled rage, depression, or terror. In a 1994 internal report, it was found that 60% of Auror trainees who did not receive psychological instruction dropped out within the first year due to emotional destabilization. One of the darkest moments in the Auror Office's modern history came during the First Wizarding War, when multiple young Aurors, including a bright witch named Caroline Digsby, began exhibiting symptoms of curse echo. In Caroline's case, after surviving an encounter with a Death Eater who specialized in dream invasion hexes, she reported hearing the voices of the dead in her sleep. She became convinced she was being followed by shadowy figures, though magical surveillance showed nothing. A week before she was scheduled to see a healer, she vanished. Her case became the catalyst for making psychological evaluations mandatory. The phrase curse echo was added to the department's official list of aura-related magical afflictions. The challenges faced by dark wizard catchers extend to what they carry within. Their magic itself can change. Auras who have spent too long near cursed artifacts or malevolent locations can experience what is now called spell inversion, a condition where protective spells like the shield charm begin malfunctioning or producing violent side effects. This is not because the wand fails, but because the wizard's own magical essence becomes unstable. The only known treatment involves a month-long detoxification ritual performed at the Ministry's Mind and Magic Alignment Chamber, another hidden facility buried below the Tower of Records. Even legendary auras are not immune. Alastor Moody, the most decorated aura in British history, was said to have relied on a private system of mental checks to maintain his grip on sanity. According to Kingsley Shacklebolt, Mad Eye wasn't mad at all, he just saw too much and never got help for any of it. It is rumoured that Moody had once spent several nights in room 319, though ministry files regarding that period remain sealed. The trauma Moody endured shaped not just his tactics, but his obsession with constant vigilance, a phrase that became his motto and a warning to others. Number 18, Harry Potter, the aura who changed the system. Few wizards realize how deeply the Auror Office changed after the Second Wizarding War, not because of a ministry decree or outside influence, but because of one young man who carried both the scars of war and a fierce sense of justice. Harry Potter, once the boy who lived, later became the man who changed everything. When he stepped into the Auror Office, he brought with him a vision that many considered idealistic, even naive. But the weight of his experiences, the names of the fallen still echoing in his mind, Fred Weasley, Remus Lupin, Nymphadora Tonks, made it impossible for him to accept the old ways. For Harry, fighting dark wizards wasn't enough. The structure itself needed to be purified. Before Harry's arrival, the Auror Office, though populated with many brave individuals, had its shadows. The use of unforgivable curses during missions was often overlooked, especially when results were achieved. Files went missing. Suspects disappeared. Transparency was a luxury, and internal corruption was whispered about in the corners of the ministry. Dawlish, for instance, a seasoned Auror known for his loyalty, was also known for his readiness to use force. Though never officially reprimanded, his methods had long been criticized behind closed doors. It was in this world of half measures and compromise values that Harry chose to serve. He began humbly, taking no shortcuts despite his fame. Kingsley Shacklebolt, then Minister for Magic, offered Harry a position of influence straight away. Harry declined. He insisted on starting as a regular recruit. "I want to earn it like anyone else," he said, and he meant it. His humility surprised many, but it was his discipline that impressed the most. He trained hard, arriving early and staying late, learning the laws and protocols he had once fought against. And as he learned, he took notes, not just on spells, but on flaws in the system. He listened to junior officers and parchment pushers with the same respect he gave to veterans. People noticed. Within 3 years, Harry was promoted to a supervisory role. It was here that he began implementing subtle but firm changes. He pushed for psychological evaluations for new auras, something previously deemed unnecessary. "We cannot send unstable minds to confront unstable magic," he argued. He also campaigned for the restriction of unforgivable curses. At one point, a young aura named Blake Yaxley, ironically the nephew of the Death Eater Corbin Yaxley, used the Cruciatus curse during an interrogation. In the old days, such an act might have been excused as a necessary evil, but under Harry's guidance, Blake was suspended and later dismissed. This set a precedent. One of Harry's boldest reforms was the institution of the Review Mirror, an independent council of 3 witches and wizards unaffiliated with the Aura office, tasked with examining questionable missions. This was unheard of. Many resisted. They called it a Muggle intrusion into magical law. Harry ignored them. He remembered how easily power had been abused when Dolores Umbridge had risen, and he refused to let history repeat itself under another name. The council didn't just exist to punish, it provided clarity, offering insight and advice on how to improve field operations. Even Ron Weasley, Harry's longtime friend and fellow Aura, confessed he had doubts at first. "But you were right," Ron later admitted. "We work better when we know someone's watching." Transparency became the new code of conduct. Cases had to be logged in full, with detailed records of every spell used, every room entered, every suspect interviewed. When a case went cold or turned violent, a secondary team would review the mission, not to assign blame, but to learn from it. Mistakes were no longer buried, they were dissected. Harry often quoted Dumbledore when questioned, "We must all face the choice between what is right and what is easy." And for Harry, burying the truth was always the easy way. Some within the ministry thought Harry was weakening the Aura office. They feared bureaucracy would slow down fieldwork. But then came the case of Delphine Riddle. Though not a major threat at the time, her arrest was carried out by the book. No unforgivables, no unauthorized surveillance, no forced confessions. The success of the mission proved Harry's reforms didn't weaken the office, they strengthened it. "We caught her with truth, not torture," said Aura Hestia Jones, who led the operation. It was a turning point. By the time Harry reached the position of head Auror, just 8 years after the war, the office was unrecognizable. The cold, dimly lit hallways were brighter, not in a physical sense, but in spirit. New recruits came not for glory, but for service. Each one took a new oath, to protect, not dominate, to defend, not destroy. Harry rewrote the oath himself. Gone were vague promises of upholding wizarding law. In their place were specific commitments to justice, compassion, and accountability. He had seen too much loss to allow more in the name of security. He never stopped being a field agent, even when his responsibilities grew. He joined raids, led investigations, walked into danger. Not out of recklessness, but because he believed leaders should share the burden. His presence was both a comfort and a warning. Once, when a junior Aura suggested using Veritaserum without permission, Harry reminded him of Barty Crouch Sr. and his abuses during the First War. "Power without principle is just cruelty," he said. The room fell silent. Years later, during the centennial ceremony of the Auror office, Harry stood before a crowd of former and current officers, his voice quiet but steady. "We are not heroes because we fight. We are heroes because we remember why we fight." The words echoed across the ministry. Even those who once opposed him now stood in silent admiration. For them, Harry Potter was no longer just the boy who lived. He was the man who rebuilt. Neville Longbottom, now Professor of Herbology at Hogwarts, once remarked during a Wizengamot hearing that Harry didn't just change the auras, he changed how young witches and wizards think about justice. Students studied his reforms. Aura training courses included entire modules based on his ethical guidelines. Books like Reconstructing Defense, The Potter Reforms became standard reading in magical law classes, and the name Potter stopped being a relic of war. It became a symbol of peaceful power. Even Hermione Granger, then head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, acknowledged that Harry's approach influenced her own legislation. She credited him during the passing of the 2023 Magical Rights Transparency Act. "Harry taught us to see justice not as a wand but as a mirror," she said. It was a phrase that quickly appeared on office walls across the ministry, engraved in brass. Despite the reverence, Harry refused to be idolized. He declined statues, turned down memoir offers, and rejected speaking tours. He believed truth didn't need decoration. His own office contained only 2 photographs, one of Dumbledore and one of the original DA in the Room of Requirement. They reminded him of where he came from and who he owed. On his desk lay a single enchanted quill, a gift from Ginny inscribed with the words, "Write the truth, not the legend." Perhaps the most profound effect of Harry's tenure was the cultural shift it caused. For decades, being an Auror was seen as a dark job, necessary but brutal. But by the time Harry stepped down, the job had dignity again. Children didn't fear Auras, they aspired to become them. Magical families, even those once skeptical of ministry power, began cooperating more freely, filing reports, seeking help, trusting the process. The public no longer saw Auras as dangerous enforcers, but as protectors with honor. Years after his retirement, Harry remained a quiet presence in the magical world. He occasionally visited Hogwarts, walked through the corridors where it all began, and sometimes paused before the empty space where the mirror of Erised once stood. He had no desire to look into it anymore. Everything he had longed for, family, justice, peace, he had helped create, not with spells or swords, but with principle. And while many remember Harry Potter for surviving Voldemort, those who truly understood history remembered something greater. He changed not only the fate of the wizarding world, but the very idea of what it meant to protect it. He proved that in a world filled with dark magic, the brightest force is integrity. Number 19. Auror Headquarters, behind the doors of magical law enforcement. The Auror Headquarters was never meant to be inviting. Tucked deep within the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, several levels beneath the glittering entrance of the Ministry of Magic, it was a place defined by shadows, locked doors, and quiet urgency. Few witches or wizards had ever seen its interior, and fewer still understood what truly happened within. For most, it was simply where the auras work. But for those who had walked its hallways, those like Kingsley Shacklebolt, Nymphadora Tonks, and later Harry Potter, it was more than a workplace. It was a battlefield, a sanctuary, and a vault of secrets all at once. The entrance to the headquarters was deceptively plain, a nondescript corridor with flickering torches and a single dark wooden door that required both a wand signature and a voice incantation to open. Once inside, the atmosphere shifted. The walls were made of polished black stone, humming faintly with protective enchantments. At the heart of the main chamber stood a wide circular table where auras assembled every morning, surrounded by floating parchment that continuously updated itself with magical disturbances reported across the wizarding world. These were not rumors, but coded messages often decrypted from enchanted quills or recovered from captured dark wizards. Harry Potter, who joined the Auror office shortly after the Battle of Hogwarts, once described the place in a letter to Neville Longbottom as a maze designed by a paranoid genius. That paranoia was not unfounded. After all, this was the very department that had once been infiltrated by Death Eaters under the nose of the Ministry. Security became more than a protocol, it became an obsession. Even the owl post had to be cleared through 3 levels of enchantments before a letter could reach its recipient inside the department. Beyond the central hub lay a branching corridor system that defied any traditional layout. There were no signs, no clear directions, only those who had walked the halls long enough to navigate by instinct or magical memory. Among the many wings was the interrogation hall, a grim, soundproof space lined with anti-concealment charms and a ceiling enchanted to detect lies. It was in this very room that Dawlish once questioned suspected sympathizers of Gellert Grindelwald, using a series of silent spells developed during the First Wizarding War. The files from those sessions, bound in thick dragonhide covers, are still kept in a warded archive just 2 doors away. Perhaps the most unsettling area of the headquarters was the vault of confiscated artifacts, a place few Aurors volunteered to enter alone. It housed everything from cursed coins used in goblin extortion rings to a mirror rumoured to trap fragments of a person's soul. The artifacts rested under stasis fields that glowed with a dull blue light, humming low and ominous. Mad-Eye Moody, legendary for his paranoia, once refused to walk through the vault without casting a detection charm every few steps. Even after his death, his notes on artifact containment were kept sealed in a drawer, labelled only Moody's Last Measures. Training was relentless and private. Aurors didn't train in open dueling halls or public spaces. Their combat rooms were deep underground, behind layers of protective runes. There, under magically altered conditions that mimicked high-pressure battlefields, rookies were pushed to their limits. These rooms could simulate total darkness, mirror mazes, or even the presence of dementors. Kingsley Shacklebolt had once told the press that you don't just learn how to fight, you learn how not to die. Every Auror bore the invisible scars of that preparation, though few ever spoke of what they endured. Records of missions were never left unattended. Each Auror kept a personal case ledger, charmed to allow only their touch. A single misstep, like Tonks's mistaken wand signature in a file transfer, could render a record inaccessible for days. The Aurors dealt not only with rogue wizards, but with ancient magic that defied classification. There was, for instance, the case of the Black Veil cult in 2005, where 3 Aurors disappeared while investigating a ritual site in Albania. Their names, Selwyn March, Lydia Harron, and Gaius Flint, are still engraved on a small obsidian plaque near the mission dispatch room. Despite the chaos and danger, there was structure. Morning briefings were sacred. Aurors arrived before sunrise, exchanging grim nods rather than greetings. They reviewed disturbances, illegal portkey trafficking, unauthorized animagus sightings, vanishing spells gone wrong. Some cases were ordinary. Others, like the reappearance of a wand thought destroyed in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, set off week-long investigations. It was here that Harry once read a report detailing a magical signature, eerily similar to that of Bellatrix Lestrange. It turned out to be a misreading, but it haunted him for weeks. Walls whispered. That's what some of the rookies said, and indeed parts of the Auror headquarters seemed alive with residual magic. In one hallway, footsteps echoed twice, once normally and once in a tone that didn't belong to the living. An old tale claimed it was the echo of Cassian Vole, an Auror who vanished in 1938 while investigating a cursed tome. They never found his body, only his wand, which now rested in the vault, humming faintly even without touch. Each Auror's desk was unique. Moody's had once been covered in anti-tracking powders and a rotating mirror. Tonks was scattered with prank items and serious hex files. Harry's, at first neat, slowly grew cluttered with case maps, coffee-stained reports, and a photograph of his godfather, Sirius, pinned between two field diagrams. He kept, too, a stone shard from a destroyed Horcrux on his shelf, not as a trophy, but as a warning. No one rose through the Auror ranks without consequences. Emotional burdens were common. Gideon and Fabian Prewett, heroes of their time, died on an Auror mission, outnumbered 5-1. Their story became a cautionary tale for every trainee. It was said that after their deaths, Alastor Moody carried their badges in his coat pocket for years. "You don't become an Auror to win," he once said. "You become one to make sure others don't have to fight." The headquarters also held a library, but unlike Hogwarts, this was no place for leisurely reading. The texts were bound in skin-like parchment, locked behind blood wards, and filled with incantations deemed too dangerous for the average witch or wizard. Many of these books had been taken from the private collections of captured dark wizards. Aurors studied them to understand their enemies, not to use their knowledge, but to recognize the signatures of forbidden spells in the field. Harry spent many hours here during his early years in the office, reading descriptions of curses that once crippled entire villages. One rarely discussed room was the memory vault, where captured pensive memories were stored for future analysis. These silvery threads were not merely collected, they were reviewed, categorized, and sometimes used in court proceedings. The vault held memories from spies, victims, and even repentant Death Eaters. It was said that within one particular vial, labeled only RAB, lay a fragment of truth about the final hours of Regulus Black. Harry once held that vial in his hand, but never dared look inside. Behind every locked door in the Auror headquarters there was history, some written, some buried. During his tenure as head of the Auror office, Harry tried to renovate parts of the department to be more transparent. But even he admitted that some darkness needs to stay buried where it can be watched. His efforts resulted in clearer protocols, improved training ethics, and psychological support systems. Still, the old ghost lingered. The portraits on the wall, former Auror chiefs, seemed to follow newcomers with wary eyes. The most chilling part of the headquarters remained the Room of Lost Wands, a small chamber where the wands of fallen Aurors were laid to rest. Each was placed on velvet, labelled with the name of its bearer, the mission they died on, and a short quote. Tonk's wand rested beside Remus Lupin's with the words, "In light and in shadow she stood unshaken." Harry once stood in that room for nearly an hour after a mission went wrong, saying nothing, just listening to the silence that clung to the walls like a spell. It was a reminder that their job was never just about magic. It was about sacrifice. Number 20. Aurors in other countries. Who protects the magical world? In the shadowy aftermath of the Second Wizarding War, while the world celebrated the fall of Voldemort, few noticed the quiet surge of international cooperation that swept through the corridors of magical law enforcement. While British Aurors had long held the spotlight, with legends like Kingsley Shacklebolt and Nymphadora Tonks shaping the public's imagination, there were entire orders, brigades, and departments across the globe devoted to the pursuit of justice and the containment of dark forces. These international counterparts, though rarely mentioned in textbooks or on the pages of the Daily Prophet, played an essential role in protecting the magical world, especially in the turbulent years that followed Voldemort's demise. In the United States, the Department of Magical Law Enforcement falls under the Magical Congress of the United States of America, better known as MACUSA. Their Aurors, though similarly named to their British counterparts, operate under a different cultural code. Head Auror Theodard Fontaine was instrumental during the 1990s in the crackdown on rogue dark wizards who fled Britain and attempted to re-establish underground networks on American soil. Fontaine, a stern yet visionary wizard from New Orleans, once said in a classified MACUSA report, "The war may have ended in Britain, but its echoes cross oceans. Evil does not respect borders." It was under his leadership that the infamous witch Morgana Varel was captured in Chicago, where she had been harvesting magical energy from nomad electrical grids. France, with its refined magical tradition, hosts the Agence de la Protection Magique, a department both elusive and elegant. Based in a hidden wing of the Palais Garnier in Paris, the agency oversees not only magical crime, but also the delicate balance between wizardkind and the rich, magical ecosystems of Europe. Chief Enchanter Thérèse Dubois, a former Beauxbatons prodigy, led her agents in a covert operation in 2001 that dismantled the remnants of the Ligue des Ombres, a dark society that had splintered from Grindelwald's original European followers. What set the French agency apart was its heavy reliance on magical art and ritual. The agents often used enchanted mirrors, music-based charms, and dream interpretation techniques in their investigations, a tradition dating back to the 17th century. In Japan, the Magical Law Enforcement Division is known as the Seikatsu Maho Seicho, the Division of Magic Purity. Their agents are often mistaken for monks or folklore researchers due to their silent manner and ceremonial dress, but these peacekeepers wield a fearsome authority. During the global hunt for escaped Death Eaters in 1999, it was the Seiko who apprehended the necromancer Hideaki Moriyama in the foothills of Mount Fuji, where he was attempting to open a rift to a forbidden magical realm. Their methods, rooted in centuries-old Eastern magical traditions, emphasize internal clarity and restraint. Spells are cast with precision, minimal flourish, and often without wands. As one retired agent once wrote in a now declassified ministry scroll, "Where there is noise, there is deception. Where there is silence, there is truth." Brazil's Ordem da Serpente de Prata, the Order of the Silver Snake, has a history as vibrant and dangerous as the rainforest that hides their base of operations. Formed during the colonial era, the Order blended indigenous magical traditions with European spellcraft to create a unique form of jungle justice. Agents of the Silver Snake are known for their use of animagus transformation during surveillance, and some of the most advanced magical camouflage spells in the world. During the 2003 raid on the Atlantica Coven, a rogue group of wizards dealing in dark, magical beasts, the Order's operatives moved so fluidly through the dense foliage that not a single alarm was raised before the entire network was dismantled. Senior Agent Tiago Mendes, a renowned spellweaver, reportedly led the charge with his silver serpent Patronus slithering through the trees as a signal of approach. While these national agencies operate independently, the past few decades have seen an unprecedented level of cooperation between them. The catalyst was undoubtedly the chaos of Voldemort's resurgence and the realization that no single nation could shoulder the burden of dark magic alone. The International Confederation of Wizards, once a largely symbolic body, took a more proactive stance following the Battle of Hogwarts. The formation of the Global Magical Enforcement Accord in 2001 marked a turning point. Under this agreement, elite units from each magical country could operate under joint missions, especially in matters involving cross-border magical threats. An early test of this accord came during Operation Black Fang, a three-nation mission to apprehend the elusive dark healer Laurent Krell. Known for his ability to resurrect nearly dead magical creatures and manipulate them for dark purposes, Krell had been sighted in southern France, the Appalachian region of the United States, and the jungles of Peru. It was a collaborative task force led by Auror Susan Bones, French agent Clément Laurent, and Brazilian operative Maria Esperança that finally cornered him in a sunken temple beneath the Amazon. The mission lasted 13 days, involved 5 confirmed duels, and ended with Krell's imprisonment in Nurmengard, now repurposed as a global dark wizard containment facility. Even within Hogwarts, there was growing awareness of these international protectors. In the 2014 revised edition of Hogwarts, A History, a new chapter was added detailing global magical safeguards, describing how countries like South Africa, India, and Australia had unique divisions of their own. South Africa's Shadow Warden Zoekdorp, for example, use ancestral magic and bone reading to track down magical criminals. In India, the Circle of Kalchakra oversees both magical crime and prophecy interpretation, their agents trained in temporal magic unlike anything known in the West. These facts, though exotic, serve to remind students that magical justice was not a British construct but a global one. Harry Potter himself, after the war, worked with the Department of Magical Law Enforcement but also participated in several global training seminars. According to the 2020 biography, The Auror's Path, from boy to sentinel, he visited Macusa to observe Auror training and even corresponded briefly with Thérèse Dubois about European tracking charms. "It's fascinating how different we all are," Harry reportedly wrote in a private letter to Hermione, "yet we're all chasing the same thing: safety, truth, peace." His respect for international approaches influenced later reforms in the British Auror Office, particularly the inclusion of foreign defensive techniques in training programs. There is a reason why, despite Voldemort's fall, the wizarding world remained on alert. Darkness doesn't die. It hides, as Kingsley Shacklebolt warned in a confidential ministry address in 1998. Indeed, intelligence gathered by Japanese and German agents in the early 2000s suggested the formation of a group known only as Umbra Tenebris, the Shadow of Darkness. Believed to be made up of surviving Death Eaters, renegade acolytes of Grindelwald, and even outcast seers, this group's activities remain shrouded in mystery. Only scattered evidence, a cursed rune found in Morocco, an attack on a healer in Prague, and encrypted letters recovered in a Vienna bookshop, pointed to their presence. Yet cooperation persisted. British Auror Daphne Greengrass conducted a joint investigation with South Korea's Magical Protection Unit to uncover a smuggling ring of cursed manuscripts. In a rare press statement, Greengrass admitted, "Without our counterparts in Seoul, the ring would have slipped through the cracks. Magical crime is clever. It adapts. So must we." The sense of unity, forged in battle and reaffirmed in peacetime, became the shield behind which the wizarding world slept. Perhaps the most symbolic moment came during the International Wizards Summit of 2012, when representatives from over 50 magical nations lit ceremonial lanterns bearing the crest of their enforcement divisions. They floated into the night sky above Geneva, each glowing with magical light. Aurors, agents, protectors, different names, different uniforms, but all sworn to guard the unseen world that teeters always on the edge of shadow. It is in this shared vigilance that the legacy of the Aurors continues, not as lone defenders of one island nation, but as part of a hidden web of watchmen, wardens, and warriors. Their tools differ, their spells may vary, but the fire that fuels them is the same, a fire lit long ago when the first wizard picked up his wand, not to destroy but to protect, and somewhere in a rainforest, a temple, or the ruins of a castle, that fire still burns. Number 21, the most dangerous case in Auror history. In the aftermath of the Second Wizarding War, when peace hung in the air like fragile glass waiting to crack, the Department of Magical Law Enforcement found itself dealing with remnants of dark power, too dangerous to leave unchecked. Among the countless investigations launched during those chaotic years, one case stood out, not because of its fame, but because of its silence. Buried in classified files and whispered only in the deepest corners of the ministry, the mission involving the artifact code-named Mirror in Verso remains the most perilous operation ever undertaken by Aurors. Known only to a few, this case nearly shattered the minds of its participants, left 2 wizards permanently missing, and tested the limits of magical law enforcement like nothing before or since. The Mirror in Verso was an artifact older than any known magical relic in the Ministry's archive. Believed to have been forged during the time of Morgana Le Fay, the mirror was said to show not just reflections but inversions of the soul, manifestations of twisted possibilities, of desires that could deform a wizard's identity beyond recognition. Unlike the mirror of Erised, which revealed secret longings, the mirror in Verso manipulated them. It amplified shadows in the mind and fed on fear. According to an old Unspeakable's report dated 1924, the mirror had last been seen in the possession of a secretive cult known as the Tenebris Circle, a group eradicated by British Aurors in the early 20th century. At the time, the mirror vanished without a trace. Its sudden reappearance was triggered by a trail of cursed objects discovered in Nocturne Alley shortly after Voldemort's fall. A black market seller, arrested for trafficking dragon blood, let slip under veritaserum that an object which could control thought had resurfaced in Albania. The department took this seriously. The record of the mirror in Verso was quietly retrieved from the Department of Mysteries, and a task force was formed with the highest level of secrecy. Leading the mission was Auror Kingsley Brostver, a respected, methodical wizard known for his resistance to legilimency, and among the group was a name that would one day make history: Hermione Granger. At the time, Hermione was not yet Minister for Magic, but she had already made a name for herself in the Auror office. Having refused multiple offers to join academia or magical law, she dedicated herself to fieldwork, believing that rebuilding the post-war world required more than policy. She believed in action, in exposure to real threat. Her involvement in the Mirror in Verso case marked one of the last field missions she ever took part in, before moving into political leadership. She was selected for her unmatched knowledge of magical artifacts, especially those dealing with mental manipulation, and for her unyielding mental strength. The team was composed of 6 highly trained Aurors. Alongside Kingsley and Hermione were Malcolm Proudfoot, known for his expertise in counter-curses, Helena Marsh, a specialist in magical psychology, Dimitri Slane, a Bulgarian operative on loan from the Eastern European Auror Union, and Thomas Yaxley, a defector from a long line of dark wizards who had earned his place by exposing several Death Eater caches they left for Eastern Europe under the guise of diplomatic envoys. According to internal notes later redacted, their first clue led them to the ruins of a war-torn estate in the Albanian forest, where Dementor traces still lingered in the air. What they found in that manor remains officially undisclosed, but Helena Marsh, who later retired citing unspeakable internal damage, left a note in her private journal, later obtained through her estate, which read, "It was like seeing your reflection blink when you hadn't." From there, the operation entered its most dangerous phase. The mirror, they discovered, was not a passive object. It had become sentient. Not in the way a portrait is sentient, nor even like the sorting hat, but in a way more invasive and terrifying. Exposure to it caused auditory hallucinations, memory distortion, and in at least one case, induced comas. When the team attempted containment, the mirror retaliated, not with spells, none were detected, but with what Marsh described as mental contamination. Malcolm Proudfoot collapsed screaming about eyes in the wall. Slane attempted to apparate out and was found hours later, 20 kilometers away, in a swamp, chanting names no one recognized. Yaxley, the last to interact with the mirror directly, vanished entirely after stepping behind it. His body was never recovered, and a magical echo of his voice was detected inside the mirror days later, whispering his own name over and over again. Kingsley Brostver made the call to destroy the mirror, but conventional methods failed. Fiendfire only bounced off its surface, and even basilisk venom, retrieved by Hermione from a preserved fang, seemed to dissolve before touching the glass. It was Hermione herself who devised the final attempt, a memory wipe spell cast in unison by 5 Aurors while focusing on their deepest truths, an act meant to anchor their identities against the mirror's chaos. The spell worked, the mirror cracked, but the price was brutal. Slane and Proudfoot lost chunks of their memory. Yaxley remained missing. Marsh was institutionalized, and Brostver and Granger returned carrying invisible scars that even St. Mungo's could not heal. Years later, when Hermione Granger became Minister for Magic, she made no mention of the mirror in Verso in her memoir. But she did pass legislation known as the Magical Artifact Containment Reform Act, which created a specialized subdivision under the Department of Mysteries with full discretion over dangerous sentient objects. A footnote in that bill references, Item 57b, psycho-reflective matter capable of mental inversion. Scholars believe this refers to the mirror in Verso, but no public confirmation was ever made. Even more curiously, a line was removed from the original draft which allegedly stated, "Not all minds return the same." Kingsley Brostver retired not long after the mission. In a rare interview given to the Daily Prophet in 2011, he remarked, "Some objects aren't meant to be found. The darkest magic doesn't destroy you like a killing curse. It waits inside you, feeding on your questions." When asked if he regretted the mission, he paused and added, "Only that we didn't lose more." It was never clarified what he meant by that. The Ministry keeps the remains of the mirror in Verso in a sealed vault beneath Level 9. It's said that even the Unspeakables refuse to examine it directly. A spell known only to Hermione and her deputy minister is believed to guard the vault. Rumours persist that the mirror still whispers, that it calls out to those who've seen it, pulling them back. Thomas Yaxley's voice was reportedly heard as recently as 2020 during a random audit of magical artifact echoes, repeating the phrase, "I was never me." This operation, still shrouded in bureaucratic silence, marks a turning point in the understanding of magical objects. Unlike cursed relics, which often follow a logic of malice, the mirror in Verso obeyed no emotion. It wasn't angry or spiteful, it was curious. It sought to learn the people who gazed into it, and in that knowledge it unmade them. Helena Marsh described it best when she wrote, "The mirror doesn't show who you are. It shows who you could be if nothing inside you ever healed." There are no monuments to the mission. No honors were granted to those who returned. No names were added to the Hall of the Brave. The file remains sealed in the restricted archives, and most young Aurors today have never heard of it. But among the older generation, among those who worked through the shadows after the war, the mirror is still a name that conjures silence. When asked during a Wizengamot hearing why the Ministry refused to disclose details, Hermione simply said, "Some truths deform the teller." The Department of Magical Law Enforcement issued an internal document labelled Aura Code Red Mind-Altering Artifact, with only one case listed under that classification. To date, no other object has received the same designation. The mirror in Verso remains unique, not just in power, but in the fear it instills. Not in what it does to your body, but what it does to your sense of self. It asks questions you never wanted to answer, and then it answers them for you. There are those who believe the mirror should have been destroyed entirely, that keeping its fragments is a mistake that will one day be paid for. But as one anonymous Unspeakable reportedly said, "We didn't contain it to study it. We contained it because we're afraid it remembers us." The fear isn't just that the mirror holds reflections. The fear is that it holds pieces of the Aurors who faced it, and that those pieces may still be waiting to come back. Number 22. Not everyone can quit. Not every Auror who wants to leave can simply walk away. The image of a hardened, dark wizard catcher turning in his badge and wand for a peaceful retirement in the countryside is a comforting fiction, one that the Department of Magical Law Enforcement would rather the public believe. But reality is far more complicated. Deep within the Ministry of Magic, particularly in the Aura Office, there are protocols that bind the most experienced agents tighter than any chain. Among them is a magical silence, a vow that transcends ordinary confidentiality, ensuring that the secrets they carry never find their way into the wrong hands. Aurors who have worked on high-level cases, especially those involving forbidden magic, restricted artifacts, or high-profile dark wizards, are subject to this magical oath. It is not merely symbolic. Those who attempt to speak about restricted topics after taking the oath experience immediate physical consequences. Some lose their voices temporarily, others suffer acute magical recoil. In rare cases, the Ministry has had to intervene when a former Auror's attempt to break the silence resulted in memory deterioration. These aren't punishments, they're failsafes. The magic is designed to protect the Auror and the wizarding world from the devastating power of classified knowledge. One of the most disturbing precedents came after the fall of Bartemius Crouch Jr., a case that nearly destabilized the Ministry's internal structure. It was discovered that Crouch Jr., long thought to be dead in Azkaban, had been secretly harbored by his own father, Bartemius Crouch Sr., under the Imperious Curse. The cover-up was so extensive that multiple Ministry officials had unknowingly assisted in maintaining the lie. When the truth came to light during the Triwizard Tournament in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the backlash was fierce. But what the public didn't see was what followed in the weeks after. Several Aurors who had worked in close proximity to the Crouch family were quietly retired. They did not return home. Instead, they were relocated under new names, some even across international borders. Though officially labelled as early retirements or personal health sabbaticals, insiders knew the truth. These individuals held dangerous information about the Crouch cover-up and were seen as potential liabilities. One of them, a seasoned Auror named Dorian Frey, had been on active surveillance for nearly 2 years before he was finally granted limited freedom. Even then, he was monitored via magical tracing spells embedded in his wand. Kingsley Shacklebolt, who later became Minister for Magic, once hinted at these practices in private correspondence recovered after the Second Wizarding War. In a letter addressed to Amelia Bones, he wrote, "Trust is a fragile thing. The greatest danger isn't from those who attack from without. It's from those who walk our halls, who know every corridor, every code, every door without a lock." This was not idle paranoia. During the rise of Voldemort, multiple leaks from within the Ministry were traced not to active Death Eaters, but to disillusioned employees who once served the light. In response to these events, the Auror office revised its internal exit protocols. Any agent wishing to resign had to undergo a rigorous debriefing involving veritaserum, legilimency screenings, and in extreme cases, partial memory modification. The Department of Mysteries advised the implementation of binding enchantments that would trigger should the Auror ever attempt to reveal top-secret information, either by force or by accident. The ethics of these measures were hotly debated behind closed doors, but their effectiveness was undeniable. Since their enactment, no high-level Auror has successfully leaked classified information. There is one notable exception. Elspeth Greengrass, a cousin of the well-known Greengrass family, served in the Auror office during the First Wizarding War. She was involved in the investigation of dark artifact trafficking, specifically a case that linked several pure blood families to cursed heirlooms, once belonging to Salazar Slytherin himself. When she resigned in 1983, citing personal stress and disillusionment, the Ministry hesitated. She had taken the magical vow, and yet 3 years later, fragments of her research began appearing in underground publications. The breach was never proven, but the implications were staggering. Greengrass disappeared shortly afterward. Her home was found abandoned with signs of magical struggle. Some speculated that rogue Death Eaters had hunted her down. Others whispered a more unsettling theory, that the Ministry itself had enforced the oath by terminating its subject. Her name is now rarely mentioned, a ghost story among junior Aurors, a warning that not all retirements are peaceful. This clandestine control over former employees is not limited to Aurors. Obliviators, for instance, are subject to similar restrictions, but the Auror's role in confronting the darkest threats means their silence is more heavily enforced. During the events of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Harry overhears Tonks and Kingsley discussing protocol in hushed voices, an indication that there are layers of bureaucracy even seasoned members must navigate. When Tonks introduces herself in Grimmauld Place, she says, "Auror, new this year, still got a lot to learn." What she doesn't mention is the training in psychological endurance, the secrecy drills, or the repeated vow renewals required even after completing the Aura Academy. The magical silence is not merely a spoken promise, it is a ritual. It involves binding one's intent, thoughts, and memories to the cause of magical law. Wands are used in the ceremony, but so are relics kept in the Hall of Oaths. Ancient artifacts said to be connected to the founders of the Aura office. Those who take the oath feel a pressure in their chest, a binding that never truly leaves. Former Auras have described the sensation as a silent pulse that activates when dangerous memories rise to the surface. They learn to suppress, to compartmentalize, to forget, not through obliviation, but through pure will. This magical control mechanism has drawn criticism from certain quarters. Goblin representatives have compared it to enslavement. Some members of the Wizengamot have proposed reforms, arguing that the Silence Oath could be misused to cover up ministry corruption. And indeed, during the investigation of Dolores Umbridge's abuses, it was discovered that at least one Aura was prevented from testifying due to a binding enchantment. His mind had sealed the memory so deeply that not even Veritaserum could retrieve it. The psychological toll is immense. Many former Auras suffer from isolation, anxiety, and chronic insomnia. They cannot speak about what haunts them, and this enforced secrecy corrodes their relationships, their sense of self. One retired Aura, speaking anonymously in an interview for the Daily Prophet, said, "It's like I've lived two lives. One is public. The other is buried beneath layers of silence so thick I sometimes forget who I really am." The ministry, for its part, maintains that these measures are necessary. They point to the numerous times insider information has saved lives, stings on dark magic dealers, preemptive captures of Death Eater sympathizers, and even thwarted assassination plots against Wizengamot members. The knowledge stored in an Aura's mind is a vault of potential disasters. Letting it walk away unguarded is a risk the ministry cannot afford. What's perhaps most chilling is the reality that these protections don't fade with time. The magical oath persists until death. Even in old age, a former Aura is watched, not always visibly, but through enchantments woven into their personal records, wand trace logs, and international travel permissions. A trip to a foreign country might require clearance. A visit from a former colleague could prompt a silent audit. They are never truly free, not in the way most wizards understand freedom. The case of Aura Dorian Frey illustrates this best. After his release from surveillance, he attempted to live a quiet life in the Scottish Highlands. He married, opened a small shop selling protective amulets, and kept to himself. But when a customer accidentally mentioned Bartemius Crouch Jr. by name, Frey fainted. Medical healers later confirmed it was a magical seizure triggered by a restricted memory. The incident forced the ministry to re-evaluate its memory buffer spells. Frey now lives under constant monitoring despite never having committed any offense. Ultimately, the story of Auras who cannot retire is a reflection of the price paid for safeguarding the wizarding world. They are the shield against chaos, but the weight of that duty never leaves their shoulders. In a world where memory is power and silence is protection, they become prisoners of their own minds, guardians of truths they can never share. Number 23, Patronus, the ultimate test of readiness. Few outside the Aura office know that the true test of an Aura candidate lies not in their dueling skills, nor their knowledge of dark artifacts, but in something far more intangible. Among the elite within the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, it is quietly accepted that the ability to cast a corporeal Patronus is the single most reliable indicator of readiness, not the hazy wisp-like form that flutters from the wand of an average witch or wizard, but a full-bodied, blazing creature of light. The Patronus, that ancient charm born of hope and purity, serves not merely to repel dementors, but to reveal the very marrow of a person's inner life. When Electo Caro fled the scene of her interrogation in 1982, it was not her cunning that led Auras to suspect she had inside help, but the discovery that one of the new recruits had never cast more than a silvery mist. That recruit was promptly dismissed. Alastor Moody, the most feared and respected Aura of the modern era, is often quoted in the training halls of the ministry for his brutal honesty. "If you can't conjure a Patronus," he once growled, "you won't last a single night with a real Shadewalker." His words were not idle hyperbole. Aurors are tasked with hunting down creatures and criminals that feed on fear, corruption, and pain. Their enemies are not always human. Some, like the mysterious Tmokradi, dark entities that slither between shadows, are drawn to emotional weakness, like moths to flame. Moody's insistence on the Patronus was rooted in cold experience. During the infamous Mulpepper case of 1979, it was the failure of a junior Auror to summon his Patronus in a tunnel under Nocturne Alley that cost 2 senior officers their lives. Dolores Umbridge, for all her disdainful bureaucracy, once attempted to remove the Patronus test from the recruitment process, declaring it unscientific and emotionally biased. The result was a sharp increase in psychological breakdowns among new recruits. One such case was that of Marcus Belby's cousin, Dorian Bell, a gifted duelist who cracked under the mental strain of a routine mission against a werewolf den. Though he passed his dueling assessments with distinction, he had never once conjured a corporeal Patronus. After Bell's tragic suicide, the Patronus test was reinstated quietly and without debate. Within Hogwarts, the importance of the Patronus is subtly reinforced. Professor Lupin, when teaching Harry Potter the charm in The Prisoner of Azkaban, knew well that the boy's ability to produce a full-bodied stag at such a young age was more than impressive. It was a sign of extraordinary inner strength. Dumbledore himself remarked later that Harry's Patronus was uncommonly advanced for his age, a statement that made its way into ministry briefings. It is said that the department kept a close eye on Potter from that point forward, considering him a potential Auror even before the Second Wizarding War began. But perhaps the most compelling case in support of the Patronus as a litmus test is that of Nymphadora Tonks. During the final years of the First War, Tonks was one of only 3 applicants out of 47 to conjure a corporeal Patronus during initial trials. Her Patronus at the time was a jackrabbit, energetic, agile, and filled with hope. But in the months following Sirius Black's death, her Patronus changed to a wolf. This alteration, subtle to some, alarmed many in the Auror office. Patronus transformations are exceedingly rare and often signal a profound shift in emotional landscape. While some interpreted it as an expression of love for Remus Lupin, Moody believed it was a sign that her light was dimming under grief, and he was right. Tonks struggled on missions during that period, her performance uneven, her aura flickering with shadows. There is a quiet ceremony held in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement every year, known only to those who wear the Aura badge. In a darkened chamber beneath Level 2, new recruits are invited to stand before the penumbra wall, a charmed slab of obsidian that reacts to magical purity. Each recruit is asked to cast their Patronus onto the wall. Those who produce only mist are not reprimanded, they are given a choice. Some leave, others train for years, returning again and again until the day their Patronus gallops, soars, or prowls across the black stone in dazzling light. The wall remembers every Patronus ever cast upon it. It is said that if you listen closely, you can hear echoes of past casters, a whisper of hooves, the rustle of wings, the low growl of a spectral lion. Kingsley Shacklebolt, during his time as head of the Auror office, maintained meticulous records of Patronus forms. He believed that the animals summoned by each Auror revealed not only their strengths, but their vulnerabilities. His own lynx Patronus, graceful and silent, was chosen as much for protection as for strategic insight. In one particularly tense mission in the Albanian forests, he and Dawlish were cornered by a pack of Inferi controlled by a rogue necromancer. Dawlish, unable to produce more than fog, fell into panic. It was Kingsley's Patronus that held the creatures at bay long enough for them to escape. That incident became part of the internal training manual listed under why the Patronus matters more than a wand. The Patronus is also used in field conditions as a way of checking mental integrity. There have been missions where Aurors returned compromised, having been exposed to mind-altering spells or substances. A routine Patronus check performed upon re-entry revealed everything. An Auror unable to cast their usual form, or any Patronus at all, was immediately quarantined for psychological evaluation. In 1986, a respected Auror named Gideon Thorne returned from a mission in the Scottish Highlands and could only produce a broken wing from his usually radiant falcon. He was found to have been imperioused by a former Death Eater hiding among the local centaur herds. Even the Auror Office's darkest failure is linked to this phenomenon. During the brutal Knot conspiracy trials of 1983, a high-ranking Auror, Meredith Crouch, was accused of feeding information to fugitive dark wizards. It was discovered during a private investigation that she had not cast a Patronus in over a year. When confronted, she admitted to experiencing recurring nightmares and emotional paralysis. Her fall from grace was not one of ideology, but of spiritual exhaustion. Her case became a cautionary tale. No matter how skilled, no matter how loyal, the inability to conjure a Patronus is the first sign of a soul in retreat. Among students and casual spellcasters, the Patronus is admired for its aesthetic. A swan, a unicorn, a fox. Each carries meaning, but for an Auror it is the sharpness of light, the confidence of form, and the ease with which it emerges that matter most. Patronuses that flicker or hesitate are signs of incomplete conviction. Moody once recounted a mission in which a young recruit's Patronus, a faltering fox, evaporated mid-flight during a standoff with a wraith-like entity near Little Hangleton. The entity, sensing weakness, attacked, and the recruit barely survived. That recruit never returned. During the Second Wizarding War, as the Order of the Phoenix operated in secrecy, Patronuses became more than symbols of resistance. They were lifelines. Kingsley's lynx, Hermione's otter, and Arthur Weasley's weasel were used to send messages and confirm identities. It was not just that these forms were familiar, but that their consistency under pressure proved the caster's mental clarity. In a world where polyjuice potion and false allegiances abounded, the Patronus became the only unforgeable signature. There was one curious exception to the rule. Severus Snape, whose Patronus was a doe, the same as Lily Potter's, cast it only in private. Dumbledore, who witnessed it, claimed it was the only pure part of the man. Though Snape never joined the Auror ranks had he applied, his Patronus would have spoken volumes. It was not his cunning, nor his knowledge of the dark arts, but the steadfast image of that ethereal doe that may have earned him a place among the protectors of the magical world, had his loyalties not been so dangerously divided. Today, the Patronus remains an unofficial gatekeeper. Auror hopefuls speak of the moment they first cast their animal form as a rite of passage. Not all succeed. Some never do. And those who do often remember the moment forever, not because of the magic itself, but because of what it told them about themselves. The ability to summon light in the darkness is not learned through books. It is earned through loss, love, conviction, and sometimes a single unshakable memory. The Patronus is not a spell, it is a mirror. And in the eyes of the Auror Office, it is the only one that never lies. Number 24. Traitors Within. Aurors who turned dark. It was easy to believe that evil wore a dark cloak, carried a wand with malice, and shouted unforgivable curses in the heat of battle. But history taught something far more unsettling. Evil sometimes wore ministry robes, took notes in meeting rooms, and carried out orders with a steady, loyal hand. The Auror Office, the elite force meant to be the last line of defense against dark magic, had not always been immune to corruption from within. The story of John Dawlish, once one of the department's finest, stood as a stark reminder that the line between protector and pawn could blur dangerously, even fatally. Dawlish had all the traits of an ideal Auror, described as powerfully built, with a military moustache and a no-nonsense demeanour. He exuded authority and confidence. He had graduated with top marks from the Auror training program and was considered one of the ministry's most reliable operatives. His record was spotless, his loyalty unquestioned. When Cornelius Fudge needed someone to apprehend Albus Dumbledore, Dawlish was the man chosen. That fact alone spoke volumes, but that moment also marked the beginning of a long, humiliating unravelling, not of his skills, but of his autonomy. Though he executed his assignments with the expected precision, Dawlish found himself repeatedly bested, not just in duels, but in his very mind. He was placed under the Imperious Curse more than once by Death Eaters, once possibly by Ministry insiders. The records remain unclear on all the names involved. Dawlish, who had been confounded, was the official language used to explain away one incident. But those who studied the deeper files, the internal reports buried in the Department of Magical Law Enforcement archives, found a recurring theme. Dawlish was too skilled to be so easily defeated, unless his mind was not his own. The first known case occurred during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries. Dawlish was assigned to protect critical ministry property, but was mysteriously delayed. He later claimed memory loss and confusion. At the time, such things were attributed to the chaos of battle, but pensive examination suggested the residual traces of powerful mind magic, imperious or worse. Yet no inquiry followed. The official ministry stance was silence, a decision fueled by embarrassment and fear of public panic. Years later, when Scrimgeour took office, Dawlish was tasked with keeping an eye on Hogwarts under Headmaster Dumbledore. Again, he was easily dispatched, a jinx, a fall, a loss of memory, but again there were signs of something deeper. Dawlish attempted to arrest Dumbledore but was incapacitated, read the report. But those present noted the odd vacant look in his eyes even before he raised his wand, a look that betrayed not incompetence but control, or the lack thereof. During Voldemort's infiltration of the Ministry, the Auror office became a battleground not of wands but of minds. Dawlish was dispatched to bring in Augusta Longbottom, grandmother to Neville, a known Dumbledore sympathizer, but Augusta outwitted him. That should have been impossible. Dawlish, the master of tactical spellwork, had been trained to subdue entire rooms of spellcasters, yet he failed repeatedly against civilians. Either his skills had deteriorated, which no training reports indicated, or something had fundamentally broken inside him. The truth began to emerge after the fall of Voldemort. Post-war examinations of internal security records and pensive logs revealed a horrifying possibility that Dawlish had been subjected to prolonged, repeated manipulation, not only by Death Eaters but potentially by collaborators within the Ministry itself. In one report, redacted but later leaked, an unnamed unspeakable suggested that Dawlish had been weaponized, not merely used as a blunt instrument but groomed as a tool. His mind opened like a door and walked through at will. The implication was clear. The Death Eaters had allies within the very system meant to stop them. The magical community had always believed that Imperius left no scars, that once the curse lifted, the victim returned to normal. But Dawlish's case suggested otherwise. Over time, he grew erratic, his memory fractured. He retired quietly, uncelebrated, his legacy one of suspicion. To this day, some Aurors refuse to speak his name without a glance over their shoulder, not because he betrayed them, but because he showed how easily betrayal could wear the face of loyalty. One particularly chilling document from the Office of Magical Security described Dawlish's case as a systemic vulnerability. It admitted that Aurors were trained to resist curses, but not indefinitely, and certainly not without magical protections that the Ministry had long neglected to develop. The arrogance of the system had been its weakness, the belief that enemies could only come from outside. Dawlish proved otherwise. The enemy had walked their halls, carried their badges, and written their reports. A junior Auror, who spoke anonymously years later, recalled one particular morning when Dawlish entered the briefing room and stared blankly at the board for 10 minutes. He looked like he was watching something else, the Auror remembered. Something none of us could see. That same morning, a covert operation to monitor suspected Death Eater sympathizers failed catastrophically. The targets had vanished hours before the strike. No proof linked the leak to Dawlish, but suspicion never faded. What made the Dawlish case even more tragic was that he never once acted with malice. He did not join the Death Eaters. He did not swear fealty to Voldemort. He simply became a vessel. And the damage he caused, the botched arrests, the missed captures, the blown operations, was no less real because it was unintentional. The question then arose, was intent necessary for betrayal? Or was negligence in protecting one's own mind just as dangerous? After the war, the Ministry quietly overhauled the Auror Office's mental defences. New protocols were introduced. Pensive screenings became mandatory. Aurors were issued protective charms crafted by the Department of Mysteries, designed to resist mental intrusion. The changes were not publicised. There was too much shame, too much fear of admitting that the proud defenders of magical Britain had been so vulnerable, so fallible, but the legacy of Dawlish made those changes unavoidable. Kingsley Shacklebolt, later Minister for Magic, was one of the few to speak openly. In a rare statement he said, "Dawlish served with honour, even when his mind was not his own. We do not punish the puppet, but we must never again allow the strings to be invisible." It was a powerful acknowledgement both of Dawlish's pain and the Ministry's failure, but it did little to soothe the deeper unease that remained. Among the newer generation of Aurors, Dawlish's name became a whispered warning, a cautionary tale. They studied his case not in defence against the dark arts, but in ethics and magical responsibility. And if we can't protect ourselves, anyway, said one instructor, we can't protect anyone. And so, protective runes were carved into the walls of the training rooms. Occlumency classes became mandatory. The mind, they were taught, was the first battlefield. Yet even now, the full truth about Dawlish remains shadowed. Some believe he was not the only one, that others in the department had similarly fallen, but had been more careful, or more successful, in hiding their manipulation. A few even suggested that the Imperious Curse had been a convenient excuse in some cases. That true betrayal had happened, not under compulsion, but by choice. But Dawlish was the scapegoat, the broken symbol the Ministry needed to hide the deeper rot. What remains undeniable is the damage, the operations that failed, the trust that shattered, the legacy of a man who had once stood as a paragon of the Auror Office, now remembered as both victim and threat. In the quietest corners of the Ministry, some say his portrait still hangs in the old training room, not in shame, but as a reminder that even the strongest can fall, that the mind is not always a sanctuary, and that sometimes the darkness does not knock from outside. It opens a door that was never locked to begin with. Number 25, the Book of Forbidden Acts. In the heart of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, far beyond the public-facing offices of the Auror headquarters and deep beneath the Ministry's lower vaults, lies a small, sealed room known only to a few. It is called the Chamber of Condemned Texts, and within it rests a book, bound in what appears to be scorched dragonhide, locked behind 10 layers of enchantments and ancient curses. Officially titled the Index of Forbidden Spells and Practices, this tome is rarely mentioned aloud, even among seasoned Aurors. Those who have seen it firsthand speak of its presence with a shiver in their voices, as if merely remembering it leaves behind a residue. The book is older than the Ministry itself, believed to be a compilation of magical offences, gathered over centuries and continuously updated, and yet It's more than just a list. It is, as the mages say, alive. The origins of the index are veiled in uncertainty. Some scholars argue it was originally created by the Council of Magical Purity in the early 1300s, a now-defunct predecessor to the Wizengamot, who sought to document and contain the growing influence of dark magic spreading through Europe. Others insist the book existed long before that, transcribed from older parchments buried beneath Alexandria or Constantinople, whispered about in lost dialects. What makes it extraordinary is not just its content, but its temperament. The index reacts to being approached, as if aware of the presence of those who seek its secrets. Aurors who've earned the right to consult it do so under strict protocols, anti-possession charms, protective wards on the mind, and the presence of a witness mage from the Department of Mysteries. Each page of the index is saturated with enchantments. The ink shifts and breathes, words rearranging themselves as if resisting easy reading. Some spells are written in mirror script, others in rune languages long since extinct. The most dangerous are sealed with blood magic, visible only under cursed moonlight or in the presence of deep regret. Among these, one spell stands out, Viator Mentis, also known as the Soul-Walking Curse. It allows the caster to detach part of their consciousness, to infiltrate another person's mind and reshape it from within. The index lists its last recorded use as 1842 in the case of Magistrate Alric Gorse, who was manipulated into sentencing an innocent squib to death. The footnote beneath the entry reads simply, "Never contained. Never forgiven." Only Level 7 Aurors are granted clearance to consult the index, and only for investigation purposes of confirmed Level 5 magical crimes. Among these few was Aura Clarissa Rowan, a specialist in magical psychology. In 1986, she was granted permission to view the index after uncovering a string of hex-based suicides among wizarding children in Hogsmeade. The investigation led her to a trace of an ancient compulsion charm known as Cantor's Veil, a forbidden incantation that compels its victim to hear voices urging them to destroy themselves. Clarissa spent less than an hour with the index, but was found afterward in a state of trance, mumbling names of children who had died decades earlier. She required 6 months at St. Mungo's spell damage ward before her mind recovered. Her report included the line, "The book hums, it sings to the broken, and the melody is grief." The index is also cursed. This is not metaphor, but confirmed ministry classification. The curse embedded in the book is one of progressive mental erosion. An internal report from 1973 describes the case of probationary Aura Finian Trigg, who entered the chamber without proper authorization. Witnesses reported that he laughed as he walked in, claiming he only wanted to peek. 30 minutes later, he was found curled in a corner, unable to remember his own name. He kept repeating the phrase, "The words have no end and neither do I." Finian now resides in the Janus Thickey ward, living in permanent dissociation from reality. There is a widely held belief among the department's veterans that the index is not merely a record, but a repository of magical entropy, that it stores the emotional echoes of every curse, every incantation ever catalogued within its pages. Some researchers from the Department of Mysteries have proposed that the book acts as a conduit, a passive link to a plane of dark magic where these spells are drawn from. If true, this would make the index not just a cursed object, but an anchor to something far older and less understood. One entry concerning the spell Silens Mundi, the world-silencing hex, includes the annotation, "Language bends to silence, a spell that cannot be spoken, only thought. Once cast, its effects remain until a heart forgets its own name." The creation of the index is believed to have required the collective effort of 32 magical archivists and seers, many of whom went mad before the final page was sealed. Their fates are noted in a ministry ledger titled Compilers of the Forbidden, which itself is a restricted document. The last entry under Seer Elisander Quark ends abruptly in mid-sentence. "She began seeing her own shadow whisper. followed by an inky blotch where the rest should have been. No copies exist. Any attempt to replicate or duplicate a page of the index results in the parchment burning to ash, or worse, reversing the copying spell and erasing the original caster's memory of the text. One unnamed archivist attempted to transcribe a charm from the book in 1949 and later forgot his own language entirely. He had to relearn English from the beginning. His testimony remains in the Auror archives. I remember shapes, not meanings. The magic took meaning with it. The only known successful containment procedure for the index is the binding hex of Morcant, which wraps the entire book in enchanted chains, crafted from goblin-wrought silver and basilisk bone. These chains are renewed every decade, and the ritual is carried out under the watch of 3 senior Aurors, 1 seer, and a representative from the Department of Mysteries. During the 2001 renewal, it was reported that one of the chains melted on contact with the book, despite having been freshly consecrated. The ritual had to be repeated twice, and the seer present, Lorcanvess, later resigned, citing unbearable harmonic dissonance emanating from the index. There is, of course, skepticism surrounding the more supernatural claims. Some argue that the stories of memory loss, hallucinations, or insanity are exaggerated warnings meant to deter junior staff from probing where they shouldn't. But even these skeptics grow quiet when the case of trainee Auror Selena Marsh is mentioned. In 2015, Marsh was accidentally locked inside the chamber of condemned texts during a lockdown drill. Security logs show she was alone with the index for 12 minutes. When retrieved, she had aged visibly, her hair gone white, and her eyes unfocused. She has never spoken since, though she occasionally traces patterns in the air, resembling runes no one has been able to identify. An entry found halfway through the book reads, "Some magic is not forbidden because it kills. It is forbidden because it survives." This phrase has since become an unofficial motto among veteran Aurors, many of whom wear protective amulets etched with those words. The phrase is often misunderstood, interpreted as a warning that dark spells live on beyond their caster, but among those who've read the index, the meaning is more literal. The magic lingers. It finds ways to endure. The very act of reading about it invites it in. Among the entries of particular controversy is the practice of lux mortis, a ritual that uses light to destroy a soul rather than cleanse it. It was originally considered a form of exorcism until it was discovered that the soul's destruction was irreversible. It is listed in the index with the footnote, "Redefined by blood, light is no less cruel." The spell was outlawed in 1612 but was found inscribed in blood on the wall of a collapsed tomb in 1998. No culprits were ever identified. Perhaps the strangest feature of the index is that it updates itself. Ministry officials have never been able to determine who or what is responsible for the appearance of new entries. One morning in 2007, a spell called Echo Animagi appeared between 2 older curses. It had not been catalogued before, and no wizard or witch had claimed authorship. The spell's description simply read, "Gives voice to the dead, not their words, but their hunger." A few weeks later, 3 cases of necromantic disturbances were reported in Wales. The index remains one of the few objects in the ministry to be classified as inherently malevolent. Its presence is tolerated only because it provides information essential to combating the worst magical threats. Yet its existence is a paradox. A book designed to protect the world by documenting that which should never be known. Every generation of Aurors must decide how much they are willing to sacrifice to understand it, and each time they open its cover, they must ask themselves a question that cannot be spoken aloud. How long until the book begins to read us? Number 26. Children of Aurors, under magical protection. In the shadowy world of magical law enforcement, there exists a quiet sacrifice that rarely makes its way into the pages of the Daily Prophet. While the Aurors, the elite dark wizard catchers of the Ministry of Magic, are often hailed as heroes, Few take the time to consider the lives they leave behind every morning or the measures taken to shield their loved ones from retaliation. The threat is not imaginary. As the history of Wizarding Britain has shown time and again, the enemies of justice are not above striking where it hurts most, at the innocent, the unprotected, the family members who wear no badge yet carry the burden of fear every time their mother or father walks into the field. Children of Aurors, born into danger without choice, live under an invisible but constant watch. What most witches and wizards don't know is that these children are part of a secret, tightly controlled protection initiative, orchestrated by the Department of Magical Law Enforcement itself. The program, officially titled the Domestic Contingency Shielding Protocol, was developed shortly after the Second Wizarding War, when reports of post-Voldemort sympathizers targeting Auror families began to surface. During the aftermath, several incidents highlighted how fragile the safety net really was. In one chilling case, the young son of an Auror stationed in Kent disappeared for 2 days before being located in a forest, unharmed but traumatized, with evidence of recent magical activity all around him. The investigation never led to arrests, but it prompted the ministry to act. Since then, families of active Aurors have been offered protective measures that border on military secrecy. Children under the age of 17 receive early private lessons in defensive magic, regardless of whether they attend Hogwarts or not, and spouses are offered the option of temporary relocation to magically concealed zones, pockets of land shrouded in unplottable enchantments and ancient warding spells. One such hidden location, known among insiders as the Veiled Glen, lies somewhere in the northern reaches of Wales. Shielded by both natural geography and powerful magic, the Veiled Glen is said to house up to 20 families at a time. Life there resembles that of a Muggle witness protection facility, but with hex-resistant walls and a full-time team of trained hit wizards on patrol. The magical children enrolled in this hidden refuge attend classes taught by retired Aurors and former Hogwarts professors, those who once served during the war and now lend their knowledge to a quieter but no less critical cause. Their curriculum includes more than just charms and transfiguration. From the age of 6, children are introduced to basic shielding spells, counter-curse theory, and threat detection rituals. The goal is not to turn them into soldiers, but to equip them with just enough magic to defend themselves in the event of an emergency. Neville Longbottom, known to the wizarding world for his bravery during the Battle of Hogwarts, now serves as one of the most prominent advocates of these protective measures. As a professor of herbology and a former member of Dumbledore's army, Longbottom's experiences have made him particularly sensitive to the risks facing the next generation. What many don't know, however, is that his own family has long been under this protective umbrella. Though he is not an Auror himself, his close ties with the ministry and the target, painted on his back during the war, earned him eligibility for the program. His wife, Hannah Abbott, once confided in a private letter that she had been relocated for several months while pregnant with their first child. "There are whispers of dark ones who never stopped hunting," she wrote. "We do not fear, but we do not invite risk either. We owe it to the little ones." The Longbottom family also possesses a unique relic passed down from Neville's grandmother Augusta. It is a magical amulet worn like a brooch crafted during the First Wizarding War. Infused with detection spells, it pulses faintly with warmth when nearby magic holds malicious intent. Though it cannot pinpoint danger with precision, it serves as a first warning, especially valuable in a household where protective spells are layered thick like paint. When the amulet began glowing faintly during a family trip to Diagon Alley 3 years ago, Hannah immediately activated the emergency return port key issued by the ministry. No threat materialized that day, but the memory of that quiet signal remains etched in their minds. The amulet, a piece of history and survival, now rests in a magically locked drawer inside their home, checked every night before bed. It is perhaps unsurprising that the program remains controversial among some quarters of the magical population. Critics argue that raising children under the constant assumption of danger fosters anxiety, that cloistering them in magically sealed communities stunts their development and social interaction. But defenders like Kingsley Shacklebolt, who once served as Minister for Magic and was himself an Auror, point out that the alternative, doing nothing, is a gamble too great to take. "We have lived through the consequences of unpreparedness," he famously said during a Wizengamot session. "Never again will we offer up our families as collateral damage in the war for peace." Some of the children raised in these protected environments have grown into remarkable young witches and wizards. Aurora Finch, the daughter of senior Auror James Finch, now leads a division at the Department of Mysteries, though she was once forbidden from leaving the protection of the Veiled Glen for a period of 2 years during her childhood. She attributes her confidence and strategic thinking to the unique upbringing she received. "We were never afraid," she once said in an interview with Witch Weekly. "We were taught to observe, to listen, to think before we act. In a world of magic, fear is only dangerous when it is allowed to control you." There are, however, moments of pain and loss that no amount of training can prevent. The case of Auror Matilda Roll still haunts the department. In 2011, while tracking a rogue group of dark artifact smugglers in Ireland, she was ambushed and never returned. Her family, husband Gregory, and their twin boys had been living in one of the protected compounds. While they were physically safe, the news of her disappearance devastated the small community. Gregory eventually moved to a Muggle village in Devonshire, renouncing the magical world. The twins, now grown, chose divergent paths. One works as a healer at St. Mungo's, the other as a wandmaker's apprentice in Hogsmeade. Their mother's sacrifice remains a wound that never quite closed, but their safety was secured through the very system she helped establish. During the height of the resurgence of the dark artifacts trade in 2015, the Ministry even implemented temporary lockdowns of the protective zones. For 6 weeks, no owlpost was permitted in or out, and all residents were placed under an enchantment that scrambled their trace signatures. The children, some barely old enough to hold a wand, were kept inside reinforced dormitories where illusion charms created open sky on the ceilings and birdsong played softly from enchanted corners. These moments, eerily reminiscent of wartime isolation, are rarely spoken of in public circles, but among the families who lived through them they form a shared mythology of quiet courage. The effectiveness of the program has never been officially published, but leaked figures in 2020 suggested that of the 63 Auror families enrolled between 2000 and 2020, none experienced direct harm to their children. These numbers were later disputed, but even the harshest critics admitted that the absence of fatal incidents spoke to a certain level of success. Still, the emotional toll remains impossible to quantify. Being a child of an Auror means growing up with a backpack that contains not only schoolbooks and sweets, but also an emergency port key and a list of counterspells tucked under a chocolate frog card. Some of these children go on to live perfectly ordinary magical lives, their early training becoming a curious childhood memory, no different from piano lessons or broom-flying practice. Others find that the echoes of caution stay with them long after the threat has passed. They flinch at sudden noises, pause before entering unfamiliar shops, or instinctively scan a crowd for signs of cloaked figures. For them, the legacy of fear has become a quiet instinct, never spoken aloud, but always present. Hermione Granger, now Deputy Head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, once addressed this very topic in a closed meeting, recorded and later cited anonymously. "Safety should never be purchased with the innocence of childhood, but when it must, let us at least make that safety wise, compassionate, and invisible." Her words captured the essence of what the program tries to achieve, not the creation of warriors, but the nurturing of survivors. A life under magical protection may be restrictive, even cold at times, but it is a life preserved. Even Hogwarts has become a participant in these subtle defenses. Unbeknownst to most students, certain children arrive each year under provisional shielding wards keyed only to professors and select auras. These enchantments are renewed monthly and are woven into the very stone of their dormitories. These children are taught not to speak of the runes carved beneath their beds, or the polished coin they carry on a chain beneath their robes, coins that glow faintly red if an unregistered wand is drawn near them. In the end, the children of Aurors live in a balance between secrecy and vigilance, between the joy of youth and the weight of survival. Their stories rarely reach the headlines, their names seldom spoken in public, but behind the curtain of magical enforcement lies a network of silent guardians, shaping a future that, if not fearless, is at least better prepared than the past. Number 27. The Animagus Ban, Myth or Truth? In the shadowed corridors of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, there exists a long-standing rumor that auras, those elite enforcers of magical justice, are forbidden from becoming Animagi. The myth persists even within educated wizarding circles, perpetuated by whispers that such transformations might allow dark wizards to conceal crimes too easily. But behind this belief lies a truth far more nuanced and, surprisingly, the opposite of what many assume. The Ministry of Magic, in reality, not only allows but encourages its top auras to train in animagus magic, so long as they are properly licensed and transparent about their transformations. This unspoken strategy has played a crucial role in some of the department's most daring surveillance operations, though few outside the ministry ever hear of these exploits. Animagus transformation, while rare and notoriously difficult, has always held a certain allure for witches and wizards. However, the bureaucratic labyrinth surrounding it, complete with formal registration, magical tattoos, and regular inspections, has made most think twice before attempting it. This caution has contributed to the myth that certain careers, especially within the Office for Magical Law Enforcement, explicitly discourage the practice. Yet a close reading of ministry guidelines reveals no such prohibition. In fact, among the files marked confidential in the Aura office are reports of highly successful missions where Animagi played a pivotal role, slipping through barred windows, perching unseen above suspect meetings, or slinking into enemy territory unnoticed. Kingsley Shacklebolt, long before he became Minister for Magic, was instrumental in updating internal policies regarding animagus use among auras. During his tenure as a senior aura, he recognized that magical surveillance methods had to evolve alongside the increasingly cunning tactics of dark wizards. In a classified memo now declassified through the Freedom of Magical Information Act, Shacklebolt wrote, "Invisibility cloaks can be charmed against, disillusionment can be detected, but an animal, most Death Eaters would never suspect the cat by the fire or the hawk on the roof." These words reflect a strategic pivot that led to the discreet training of select auras in animagus transformation. One such aura was believed to have taken the form of a snowy owl. Her name, scrubbed from public records, is preserved only in the private annals of the department. Assigned to a high-risk operation in Eastern Europe, she infiltrated a castle used by a resurgent group of Grindelwald loyalists. Perched silently above their meetings, she memorized locations of hidden caches, spell rituals, and escape plans. When the time came for intervention, the Aura Office moved with startling precision. This mission, now known internally as Operation White Wing, is cited in training manuals as a prime example of animagus effectiveness in recon. Another case, cloaked in even deeper secrecy, involved an Auror whose animagus form was a black panther. This form, unlike the snowy owls, was not ideal for stealth in domestic settings, but it proved invaluable during a months-long pursuit of a fugitive dark wizard in the dense forests of Brazil. Local magical law enforcement lacked the tracking capabilities for such terrain, and international cooperation brought in a specialist from the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. The Aura, known only by the code name Umbra, tracked his prey through miles of enchanted rainforest. His speed and agility in animagus form allowed him to anticipate and intercept escape attempts. According to a senior official, the mission was a perfect dance of patience and power, something no broomstick or spell could have replaced. Critics of this practice often cite the infamous case of unregistered Animagi, such as Sirius Black and Rita Skeeter, arguing that Animaga's transformation offers too many opportunities for abuse. But such comparisons ignore the central point: regulation. The Ministry does not fear Animagi, it fears unregistered ones. "The registry exists not to suppress talent," said Hermione Granger in a press briefing during her time in the Department for Magical Law Enforcement, but to ensure accountability. Granger herself had advocated for stricter monitoring after the events of the Second Wizarding War, yet she never supported an outright ban for law. Enforcement personnel. Instead, she proposed a tiered licensing system that would allow Aurors with a proven record to apply for special operational clearances. Minerva McGonagall, one of the most famous registered Animagi, once remarked that the transformation was not a parlor trick, but a discipline. Like occlumency, it demands both emotional control and moral clarity. This quote, often cited in Animagus training syllabi, underscores the Ministry's reasoning. Those capable of the transformation are likely to be highly disciplined individuals, the very type who can be trusted with such a power. It's no coincidence that the Auror Office selects only the most psychologically stable and magically proficient candidates for Animagus training. Background checks are exhaustive, memory. Examinations are routine. Any candidate with even a hint of instability or past ethical breaches is disqualified. Despite the Ministry's discreet encouragement of Animagus use among Aurors, official documentation remains sparse. Most such agents are classified, their identities buried under layers of enchantments and restricted files. Even within the department, only a few know the full list of registered Animagus Aurors. However, leaks over the years have provided tantalizing glimpses. A redacted personnel file released in 2007 mentioned a senior field agent specialized in large feline transformation linked to operations in North Africa. Another referenced an avian-formed reconnaissance specialist awarded the Order of Merlin, second class, under an alias. The level of trust placed in these individuals cannot be overstated. One misstep, one unauthorized transformation, one attempt to obscure magical traces can result in immediate revocation of the Animagus license. The Auror Office maintains a magical ledger bound in phoenix hide that records all transformations in real time. Linked to the Animagus registry, it alerts senior officers of any unauthorized activity. Aurors who become Animagi are required to check in daily, and a breach of that schedule is considered a red flag, triggering an internal audit. According to internal sources, only one such breach has occurred in the past 50 years, and it resulted in immediate suspension pending investigation. Yet for all the oversight, those few who have succeeded in combining their Auror training with Animagus ability are held in highest regard. They are not merely agents, they are the Ministry's shadows, ghosts moving unseen in the magical world. There is an almost mythic reverence around them. In one classroom at the Auror Academy, a mural shows the silhouettes of a hawk, a fox, a stag, and a panther walking beside uniformed wizards. Beneath the image, the inscription reads, "Let them fear what they cannot see."